The following program contains graphic images and adult content. Viewer discretion is advised.
I'll kill you once I get out.
Domestic abuse. Sometimes it's physical. Sometimes it's verbal, mental, or emotional.
Can't you do anything?
And sometimes it's deadly.
I just wanted to do the right thing. I just wanted to protect my kids.
Domestic abuse impacts 1 in 4 American families. How is it hurting our children?
But it's just a form of terrorism, it really is, and it's in the home.
As part of a 3-year campaign on domestic abuse, Channel 13 is shattering the silence. Hello, I'm Angela Kane.
And I'm Scott Swan. Over the next hour, we'll show you poignant, compelling, and sometimes heartbreaking stories of domestic abuse as we continue bringing this issue out of the shadows.
Statistics are startling. Within the next 24 hours, domestic violence will cut short the lives of at least 3 women across our nation. Just think about that. Every day, abusers kill 3 women.
Women make up 85% of domestic abuse victims, but men and children are victims too. Here in Indiana, over the last year, domestic violence has claimed the lives of more than 60 women, men, and children. But the abuse isn't always physical. Families can scar each other emotionally, verbally, and mentally.
And our children are watching. Are you raising your children in an abusive home with constant fussing or fighting? We'll show you some of the signs of relationship abuse and its impact on children.
And we'll also ask you to join us in Shattering the Silence. Learn how to recognize abuse, take a stand against it, and help save or change lives.
Domestic abuse is not just somebody else's problem. It's a community problem. These are your neighbors, co-workers, friends, families. And unhealthy homes lead to unhealthy communities.
And domestic abuse impacts the rich, the poor, the middle class, and people of all races. Let's take a look back at some of the cases that have made news headlines here in Indiana so far this year. February 21st, in the southern Indiana town of Lagodi, police find the bodies of 4 people, 2 of them children, all shot to death in their home. State police say Arthur Lee Smith shot his estranged wife, their 2 children, her boyfriend, and later killed himself. March 20th, in Plainfield, 2 sisters, Crystal and Lakeisha Bonner, shot to death in their home. Police arrested Dale Wallace. One of the victims was his former fiancée. Police say Wallace had a prior charge of domestic battery. May 8th, in Lawrence, a domestic dispute ends in the death of a father and his son. Police say 23-year-old Alexander Martinez stabbed his 4-year-old son Christian and then stabbed himself after getting into an argument with the boy's mother. June 4th, in Noblesville, police arrested Indianapolis Colts player Nick Harper. He's charged with domestic battery for allegedly hitting his wife. He offers an apology.
I just want to apologize for my actions, say sorry to my family for embarrassing them, the organization, Mr. Polian, coach, and my teammates and the fans.
And on August 13th, on the east side of Indianapolis, police arrested a man who allegedly tried to hire an undercover sheriff's deputy to beat up his girlfriend. Investigators say David Kubelski didn't want her to testify at his domestic violence trial.
That's just a small number of domestic violence cases around Indiana. To get another look at this pervasive problem, we take you to the streets of Indianapolis with one of the country's busiest police departments. I took this ride with police when we first started shattering the silence, and it was eye-opening.
The shots fired. Whoever called us in stated that they heard a female in the alley screaming, "He's going to kill me."
It's a typical day for the Indianapolis Police Department's East District.
East District middle shift is the busiest in the city.
They're on the run.
You just never know what to expect.
Domestic abuse runs.
He punched you in the head. We're at in the head.
Can turn into a very explosive situation.
Some runs are false alarms.
Police department.
Others all too real.
I could hear loud screaming from inside the residence. It sounded like either bodies rolling around or furniture being turned over. She had scratches and what looked like a bite mark on her, and she initially said, "He bit me, look at this," and showed a bite mark to us.
I'm being arrested for something that didn't happen, period.
There is a protective order in effect where he is not allowed to be around her. So he violated that and was arrested for that offense.
Prosecutors charged this man with battery and disorderly conduct.
I appreciate your hospitality and your correct ability to know what's going on.
It's not the first time police have rushed to this couple's home.
We've had several runs here on reports of domestic violence.
Repeat runs on domestic abuse, all too common.
It's the same people every week or every 2 weeks.
A lot of repeat offenders.
We took a ride with Officer Jason Tallheimer, patrolling the streets now for 5 years.
About 35 to 50% of it is spent taking runs and on domestic.
And frustrations rise when cases slip away.
I had a case the other day where this woman was beaten with a tricycle. She was bloody. I mean, she was a mess. There was blood all over inside the house, and she didn't show up for court. Because she didn't show up, we were unable to prosecute this guy. What's your address, Monte?
On this day, Officer Tallheimer stops a man arrested in the past for allegedly beating up his girlfriend.
Man, don't take my bike, man.
This time, it's a traffic stop.
We catch him out here all the time, not driving without a license.
And his girlfriend shows up to defend him when just months ago she was calling police to defend her.
And she's like, I'm scared to death, he's gonna kill me.
Officer Tallheimer took the witness stand to support her case.
We go to court, she recants her story, says it's all a lie. But I'm sure I'll see her again, along with him.
I heard her screaming, called the police.
Similar scenario, different address.
Usually when I come here, it's domestic related.
This woman shows Officer Tallheimer her wounds, allegedly from her boyfriend.
You don't want an ambulance? Are you sure?
Police have been here many times.
What set him off this time? He got angry, punched her in the back of the head, and then threw her down on top of the coffee table. She thinks she has a broken arm.
It's a drama played out every day.
I'm here to help you.
In our central Indiana neighborhoods.
You and I both know that he will come back here. Do you want to go to the Julian Center? No. You don't want to go to a women's home or anything for now?
No.
Domestic abuse experts say some victims still feel bound to their abuser by fear, love, low self-esteem, or in this case, loyalty. Her relationship with her alleged abuser long-term.
16 years is a long time.
I know 16 years is a long time.
But it's also a long time to suffer.
I show up to the house, and every time I'm here, I hear, I'm done with him, I'm through with it.
Right.
This time, there's actually a protective order on file. He's calling and harassing her. This may be one of those times where she follows through with it. I hope.
248.
Go ahead, Jane.
And hope keeps police committed to help stop the violence.
You remember last time I was here, I locked you up.
Hope for the sake of future generations.
You know, you get 7, 8, 9 years from now, it's going to be happening to the daughters. It's just a vicious cycle.
The Indianapolis Police and Marion County Sheriff's Departments respond to more than 30,000 domestic abuse calls each year.
Up next, the worst horror a parent can imagine, an abused mother's incredible loss.
My world it's shattered.
But first, join us in Shattering the Silence.
If you or someone you know is suffering from abuse, call 926-HELP. It's the Navigation Hub, a domestic abuse hotline. Operators can direct you to more than 60 area agencies to meet your specific needs. We are shattering the silence.
Domestic abuse is not just somebody else's problem, it's a community problem. Log on to WTHR.com and see what you can do to help shatter the silence.
In a beautiful home like this, most families sleep peacefully knowing tomorrow will be a brighter day. But even in the best of homes, the threat of verbal and physical violence can sometimes be a nightmare that keeps families awake all night. If you are suffering silently from domestic abuse, you need to know that tomorrow can be the first step in building a better life. Shatter the silence. Ask for help now. We are waiting for your call.
They are our most precious gifts, our children, and one of the reasons some people stay in abusive relationships. They want to keep the family together. But domestic abuse fractured the family of a Connorsville woman, leaving wounds so deep, some people may wonder how she even survived.
Here it is. Come on. Come on. There. Oh, yeah.
These are happier days for Amy Wilms.
Tell me how fierce you are. Oh, yeah. Get it. Get it.
A time when she can look back and remember.
Say hi, Mommy.
Mommy,
I love you.
I love you.
What used to be her precious daughter, Kelsey.
He is a big boy.
Her baby boy, Benjamin, and a family life that looked ideal.
Look at Daddy.
But looks can be deceiving.
You probably never thought that you would be a victim of domestic abuse.
Oh, never. I always think of myself as a strong woman who wouldn't allow that. And yet, I did.
Amy says her family's life was shattered by an abusive husband, seen here in home video. She says he started out by controlling her.
He would watch the odometer on the car. When I went to work, he would know exactly what time I needed to be there, and he would call and check up and make sure that I was there.
Amy says his mental abuse escalated slowly into physical abuse.
He was the type that liked to choke. And he would take his hands, he would put them around my neck, and he would choke me until I about passed out a couple of times. And what was difficult is he did it in front of the children.
She stayed because of her children and her faith.
After I had children, my one thing is I promised God that I was not going to get a divorce.
But ironically, Amy finally left because of her children and her faith.
You know, my biggest fear was him killing me. Because if he killed me, what was going to happen to my children? God is a good God, and he would not want a woman to be in a violent relationship.
But within a few months of leaving her husband, Amy's world turned upside down. Her baby son, Benjamin, died of sudden infant death syndrome. Her daughter, Kelsey, was her strength, her comfort.
And she goes, "Mommy, are you sad?" And I said, "Yes, Kelsey, I'm sad." And I will just never forget this, her taking her little hand and patting me on the back. And she said, "Mommy, it'll be okay."
But it wouldn't be okay. Just a few months later, 3-year-old Kelsey disappeared.
You won't count for Daddy?
Never returning from a visit with her daddy in Ohio.
Hurry up and count if you want to.
Amy alerted sheriff's deputies who searched and delivered devastating news. An officer came to her home.
And he said, "I'm really sorry." He said, "Kelsey is deceased." And my world just, it shattered.
The remote spot where the bodies were found is a haven for hunters who use the
It was September of 1996, nearly 10 years ago, a time seared in Amy's memory. Officers found the bodies of Kelsey and her father at an Ohio wildlife park inside his truck. Her husband had committed a murder-suicide.
He put his arm around my daughter. She was only 3.5 years old. He took a gun. He shot her in the chest 3 times, and then he took his own life. He knew, he was so intelligent, that he knew that by taking my daughter away from me, that he would take everything. So within a 7-month time period, I left my husband, I lost my son, I buried my daughter, and I buried all of that joy that comes with being a mom. And all I wanted to do, I just wanted to do the right thing. I just wanted to protect my kids.
Nighty-night.
No kisses. Good girl.
It was a long time ago, but how do you recover from a wound so deep?
His whole goal was to destroy me, and I won't let that happen. I'm strong, and I love and I live. Where's Joy go? Where'd it go?
She lives with precious memories of her children. Kelsey loved sunflowers. Amy planted sunflowers in her memory in her backyard.
Oh, I think of them reaching up to the heavens and just being beautiful for my daughter and my son.
And Amy loves again.
I've been so lucky to be able to be remarried and have 2 wonderful stepchildren.
Amy's husband, Carl, says she is an inspiration, a woman still managing and relishing life after suffering incredible loss.
With my 2 children, I can't imagine losing them. And I think what that would mean to me, to lose my children and to still brave the day.
She braves the day with a mission.
I believe that my life has a purpose, and sharing my story is that purpose.
Amy says 10 years ago, she walked her abuse journey largely alone. She didn't know there were agencies that could help her. She survives to tell other victims, get help, get the right tools to leave.
I tell them, pick up the phone. Find someone. There are shelters. There are wonderful people who will help. If one woman listens to this and says, I need to get out, then I've done Kelsey and Benjamin honor.
Amy has taken her poignant message across the state. She has spoken before the state legislature to fight for better domestic violence laws and to state police so that they can be better educated about helping victims leave safely.
Are you in an abusive relationship? Up next, some warning signs that may surprise you. We'll also explore how domestic abuse impacts children mentally and emotionally. But first, help us shatter the silence. Support our navigation hub, the Domestic Abuse Hotline, a lifeline to many victims. Call the Domestic Violence Network of Greater Indianapolis right now at 317-475-6110. We have their number on our website at WTHR.com. We're shattering the silence.
Domestic violence isn't just somebody else's problem. It's a community problem. Log on to WTHR.com and see what you can do to help. We're shattering the silence.
How could he hurt me like this when I'm carrying his child?
I thought things would be different.
Any hope for me and my unborn child?
Abuse often begins or escalates during pregnancy and may result in pregnancy loss, preterm labor, low birth weight, fetal injury, and fetal death. There is hope. The Indiana Criminal Justice Institute funds agencies throughout the state that provide help and hope. To learn what you can do to help, call ICJI or the helpline, and together we can shatter the silence.
Our educational partner in our Shattering the Silence campaign is the Domestic Violence Network of Greater Indianapolis. This group defines abuse as the use of power and control within an intimate relationship that threatens a person's well-being. Are you in an abusive relationship? Here are some of the signs that aren't so obvious. Does your partner act jealous and possessive? Constantly criticize you, what you wear, what you say, how you look? Regularly call you insulting and degrading names? Control what you do, where you go, who you spend time with? Threaten to hurt you or your children? Keep or take your paycheck? Give you no say in your finances? Fail to respect your right to say no to a sexual activity? Blame you for everything? Say that the abuse is your fault? If you answered yes, you may be in an abusive relationship. Log on to our website at WTHR.com right now and click on the Shattering the Silence icon to get a closer look at the signs of relationship abuse.
Some domestic abuse experts say spouse abuse is child abuse. Studies show 70% of children who live in abusive homes will either become abusers or abuse victims. Remember, whatever we do, our children are watching.
I see a lot of hitting.
This is the nightmare behind closed doors for some of our children.
My mom beats my dad really bad.
This is a domestic abuse case caught on tape for Dr. Phil, a woman angry at her husband's alcoholism, frequently beating him when he's drunk.
That is your daughter watching that violence through the door.
The children are innocent victims.
And I want to help you, but I will not sacrifice those children into this war zone another time.
Abuse shatters their innocence.
We learn love from our parents, what love is. And if love, when we're growing up, is a fist fight every Thursday, then that's what we expect when we look for love.
Domestic abuse experts say it's not always physical abuse between parents that hurts our children.
It can be anything from calling people names, yelling at each other.
Can't you do anything? Like,
having belittling remarks, putting people down.
You got this whole day to do.
And these abusive environments can disrupt our children's lives.
Also, they're more likely to be aggressive themselves, get into trouble. They don't have problem-solving skills.
They often become literally sick.
There's the upset stomachs, there's the nervous tics, there's all kinds of things that these children experience as a way of trying to make some sense out of it.
This is a therapy session for children living in an abusive home in central Indiana. Hear their pain.
Yeah, I felt like, why do I have to go through this? I mean, I'm just a child. I'm not ready for all this.
Not ready, and often not equipped to have healthy relationships when they grow up.
So we want to stop the cycle before it begins, before they begin dating. We want them to know that it isn't okay to be abusive. It's not okay to hit people that you care about. It isn't okay to be possessive. It's not okay to be jealous.
Sometimes to stop the cycle of abuse, families can't stay together.
You two need to separate.
But sometimes therapy for the whole family and therapy to change the abuser's behavior saves the family.
And it may be that we can help that entire family heal.
Counselors urge parents to talk to your children about abuse and teach them to expect respect in relationships. If there's a cycle of abuse in your family, there are many area agencies that can teach you how to have healthy relationships. Call 926-HELP for information.
Just ahead, I go inside a prison to show you evidence of the cycle of abuse with some prisoners who want to stop the cycle.
I just want to raise my son the proper way, different from the lifestyle I was raised in.
But first, join us in Shattering the Silence.
If you or someone you know is suffering from abuse, call the Navigation Hub, the domestic abuse hotline at 926-HELP.
Join Channel 13 in Shattering the Silence on domestic abuse.
At Century 21, when we sell a home, our commitment doesn't end there.
We're a part of the communities where we work and our kids play.
We know that a neighborhood is more than just homes. It's people willing to get involved and lend a helping hand.
Last year, calls to the domestic abuse hotline were up 65% because people like you took a stand.
If you see abuse, report it.
Together, we can fill our neighborhoods with healthier, happier families.
Together, we can shatter the silence.
Many young abuse victims grow up and become batterers themselves. Studies show that 75% of violent children come from violent homes. As adults, some end up in prison. I'll look back now at a visit I made inside a prison at the very start of this campaign as we examine more now on the cycle of violence. Behind the walls of this prison in Pendleton, murderers, rapists, child molesters file into a classroom. One of the last things they're required to do before getting out of prison is attend this class.
Today we are going to be talking about domestic violence.
Many of these offenders say they grew up around domestic abuse. Joshua Kurtzinger says his father abused his mother.
I didn't have anybody to image off of, so I imaged off my friends, and it led me, to the road of destruction.
Joshua continued the cycle of violence, serving time for aggravated battery, beating up his fiancée.
I hit her in the face, I kicked her, I choked her.
How are you? Judge James Payne runs Marion County's juvenile court. He saw many of those adult criminals when they were violent children, where the cycle of violence begins.
In the last year or so, we have seen a tremendous increase of kids who are coming into court harming their parents, harming their brother or sister.
Judge Clark Rogers used to work in juvenile court. Now he oversees 3,000 cases in adult court, where the cycle continues.
You'll see some of the times the same ones come over and over again.
40% of people who come through his domestic violence court are repeat offenders. The most violent end up in prison. Clarion instructors teach prisoners about domestic violence. The most compelling part of class, this 911 tape. Screams from a young girl watching her parents fight.
What's the matter?
The emotion rattles some of these hardened criminals.
Actually, hearing the little kids scream and on the 911 calls, it really touched my heart, and I got really emotional.
But will it help break Joshua's cycle of violence? He has a son who witnessed his abusive behavior.
I just want to raise my son the proper way, different from the lifestyle I was raised in. And I don't want him to see violence and stuff like that. I want him to accomplish and achieve.
Do you think that you'll be able to stay away from becoming a batterer again?
Well, yes, I think, I've got to stay away from it. If I don't, I'll come back to prison, and prison isn't the life to live.
They get the stats.
And in 2001, 41 women died in Indiana due to domestic violence.
They get advice.
So what are some positive ways to deal with conflict? Because it's going to happen.
Don't drink.
Communication, don't drink.
But it may not be enough for Charles Payton.
I shot and killed my ex-wife.
This convicted murderer says this one domestic violence class comes near the end of his 21-year prison sentence.
I know that I'm a violent individual. I haven't received any counseling to deal specifically with my violence.
The next time you're in a relationship with someone and there's conflict involved, how will you react?
At this point, I don't know.
Will his cycle of violence continue? Payton gets out of prison next month. Charles Payton is now out of prison. He's living in South Bend, working for the Salvation Army. He's going to church and trying to get back on his feet.
Can an abuser stop abusing? Up next, we'll introduce you to a man who says yes.
Yes, you can change. If I could change, anybody could change.
But first, if you are in an abusive relationship or know someone who is, call 926-HELP. We are shattering the silence. Hi, I'm Angela Kane.
And I'm Mike Orr. WFMS is joining Channel 13 and shattering the silence on domestic abuse.
Log on to WTHR.com to see how you can help.
1 in 4 American families suffer from domestic abuse, resulting in an epidemic number of ER and physician visits. Advantage Health Solutions' mission is based on the dignity of persons and the understanding of each individual's intrinsic worth. This is why we are shattering the silence on domestic abuse by bringing it out of the shadows and into the light of day. But we need people like you willing to take a stand, to say no more. To learn what steps you can take to help, call 926-HELP or visit WTHR.com.
Domestic abuse is one of the leading causes of injury to women. Some studies show that an abuser beats a woman as much as every 15 seconds. We shatter the silence with a man who used to abuse women but says abusers can change. Terry Moore, a man at peace today, but a man whose past was a storm of domestic abuse.
You can't hurt another person without hurting yourself. It's just not possible.
He knows because he used to be an abuser.
Yeah, I've hit a woman before.
More than a decade ago, police arrested Terry 5 times for domestic violence.
I thought I was powerless over this violence that was inside of me. I used to think that I had this chemical problem in my brain.
But one day, after knocking down a girlfriend during an argument, Terry had a breakthrough in a therapy class.
One of the other guys in the class said, well, let me ask you something. If that was a 6'5", 250-pound state trooper, would you have snapped and lost it with him? And I stopped and I thought about it for a little bit, and I said, well, of course not. I don't want to go to jail.
From that moment on, Terry knew he had the power to control his rage.
It's not a chemical imbalance. It's not something outside of me, because why could I control it with the police, but not with my girlfriend?
Today, Terry talks daily about domestic abuse.
So he's scaring, intimidating her, all this stuff to keep her submissive.
But this time, he's teaching others how to recognize it.
Abuse is controlling behavior.
And how to stop it.
Yes, you can change. If I could change, anybody could change.
Terry is the program director of Nonviolent Alternatives, a batterers treatment program in Shelby County.
I'm changing the way that people think.
Terry says most abusers blame the victim. He repeats phrases in his class to help program them to take responsibility.
There's nothing that another person can say or do that can make me say or do something my conscience knows is wrong. It's me that controls when I give the mean looks. It's me that controls when I say abusive things. It's me that controls if I put my hands on someone. No one else. How about?
But Terry believes society sometimes helps foster abuse, raising men to be tough, to be controlling, to hide their emotions and fears.
We have habits that we've been programmed. Big boys don't cry. You cry, I'll give you something to cry about. What are you, a wimp? Crybaby?
With lots of hard work and effective therapy, Terry says abusers have the power to turn their lives around.
If we want to love other people and want other people to love us, we have to make it safe for them to be in our presence.
Terry is a happily remarried man now. The abuse, a skeleton he buried long ago.
What works to change that behavior is to recognize that we are accountable for our own actions.
Terry, like others who have abused, says he came from an abusive home, his father beating him, his brother, and his mother. Even with therapy for abusers, there's no guarantee treatment will work, though, so experts warn abuse victims to always have a safety plan, which we'll talk more about next. To find out where you can get an approved treatment program for abusers, call 926-HELP.
Just ahead, it's something you may be asking yourself. Why doesn't an abuse victim just leave the relationship? We'll explore some of the reasons and the dangers next. And we'll also talk with a woman who left her abuser but still cannot get away.
I'm wore out.
You'll find out why as we shatter the silence.
Domestic abuse is not just somebody else's problem, it's a community problem. Log on to WTHR.com and see what you can do to help. We are shattering the silence.
At least 1 in 5 high school girls has experienced dating violence. Are you one of them?
Does your boyfriend push you or slap you? Does he boss you around and make all the decisions?
Is he constantly criticizing you or embarrassing you in front of others?
These are the red flags of an abusive relationship. Expect respect.
Talk to your parents, school counselors, or call Helpline 211 at 926-HELP.
We are shattering the silence.
Channel 13 continues shattering the silence on domestic abuse, a pervasive problem that impacts your neighbors, co-workers, friends, and families.
A lot of people ask, why doesn't a woman just leave if she's being abused? It's more complicated than you may realize.
They stay because they've been threatened. They stay because they've been threatened that their children will be taken away from them. They've been told that no one will believe them. They've been told that you can't survive without me. Who's going to love you but me? You can't provide for these children. You can't keep a roof over their heads. And there is love. There's love. They love the person. They hate the behavior.
Bueno, nosotros en nuestro caso es muy común pensar en qué puede cambiar.
I always had a lot of hope that he would change, but also I was educated as a child that my husband, when I would get married, it would be forever. It's part of my culture.
Leaving is dangerous. Leaving is very dangerous. She's 25 times more likely to die in that period than if she stays. And that's why when people say that, you know, I say, do you understand that when she takes that step towards independence is precisely when she's most vulnerable?
75% of women who die from domestic violence are killed after leaving the relationship. Domestic abuse experts say the worst thing we can say immediately to an abuse victim is you need to leave. If victims decide to leave, they must first create a safety plan. So call 926-HELP right now or log on to our website at WTHR.com to find out how you can create a safety plan.
Central Indiana has many domestic abuse victims advocates who support and guide abuse victims, whether they choose to stay or leave a relationship. We followed one advocate and saw one of her frustrations. What happens when a woman has left her abuser and still can't escape?
Our phone.
Okay. When you got out of your car, he pushed you back up against the car?
Yeah.
What did he do when he pushed you back up against the car?
He just kept telling me he gonna kill me if he kept.
Police on the scene after domestic abuse erupts.
But I mean, he just kept grabbing me by my throat.
But before they leave behind a calling card.
I'm gonna have a lady by the name of Devon Kelly come out and talk to you.
My name's Devon Kelly, and I work with the Indianapolis Police Department.
Devon Kelly follows up where police leave off.
The police report that you made on the 27th was forwarded to me by one of the detectives.
She's a domestic abuse victims advocate, a family violence expert from the Julian Center shelter.
I had 364 clients last year.
She works out of the Indianapolis Police Department's East District.
I'm called out by the police. When I come in contact with a victim, it's because there's been a violent episode.
Her connection with victims is just a phone call away.
If you have any problems or concerns, I'll be glad to help you out.
But Devon also heads out to the streets, making house calls.
I want to make sure that the victim knows that there's somebody there for them.
On this day, Devon visits Paula Paxton, an abuse victim she's guiding through the court system.
I don't know, because I don't know what's going to happen Thursday.
Paula is a woman on the edge, facing a week of worry.
Because I've never took it this far before. That's why I say Thursday I may have to run.
Run from her home. On Thursday, Paula faces her husband in domestic violence court.
I know if they let him out, it's going to be the first place he comes to.
Her husband, Harry Paxton, is in jail, charged with invading her privacy by violating a no-contact order. He's also charged with violating probation for a domestic battery conviction.
My fears of him now, since he's been locked up, that it could get ugly.
Paula, married 13 years, says she suffers mental, verbal, and some physical abuse from her husband, often fueled by his alcohol use.
He will grab me and pull me.
Once, she fled to a shelter.
It's been hard. It's been hard.
She's done all the right things. She's gotten the protective order. She's called the police. I mean, she's worked with advocate after advocate, and still the problem just goes on. He just repeatedly breaks the protective orders, and you know, no matter how many times he goes to jail, it seems like he doesn't get the point.
I'm wore out.
That has to be frightening for her. If the judge can't stop you, and the police can't stop you, then how's Paula supposed to stop it?
As long as they continue to follow through, the system will work.
Judge Clark Rogers presides over one of 2 domestic violence courts in Marion County. He says many abuse victims won't follow their cases through and testify in court, sometimes out of fear of their abuser. But he says if they keep pressing charges and going to court like Paula, eventually the abuser could face stiffer sentences and more jail time.
It's not going to happen 100% of the time. Nothing's perfect. But if they do follow through, then their chances of being protected is significant.
For Paula, Thursday finally came her day in court with Devon Kelly there for support.
I know that I've got her and that I've got somebody now that's got my back.
The court did hand down a little more jail time for Paula's husband. He didn't want to talk to us about the case, and Paula celebrated only temporarily. He was back out of jail within weeks.
You're in a constant nightmare.
And Paula was on the move, back into a shelter.
You know, never knowing when he's going to show up, what he's going to do. It's scary.
She's down, but she's not out.
I'm the one coming out on top, because I will survive.
If I could give Paula anything, it would be a sense of security that she could say it's over and it really be over with this man.
Devon never gives up hope.
Are you familiar with protective orders?
She's back at work, giving one abuse victim at a time direction, compassion, and understanding. And sometimes her efforts are life-changing.
I know that somehow I've made a difference, and that's what makes it the most beautiful job in the world.
Devon Kelly reminds abuse victims there are many options to help you: protective orders, shelters, transitional housing, family counseling, and more. She says, remember, you are not alone.
Coming up next, a closer look at how Central Indiana is responding to domestic abuse. Community leaders and the police are shattering the silence and saving lives.
And that's why I want to encourage you to do something before you end up dead.
But they admit there's still a lot of work to do.
Domestic abuse is not just somebody else's problem.
It's a community problem. Log on to WTHR.com and see what you can do to help.
We are Shattering the Silence.
Domestic abuse affects 1 in 4 American families, and children often repeat the cycle.
For 2 years now, Channel 13 has been shattering the silence on domestic abuse. Now we invite you to join us and take action.
Educate yourself about this pervasive problem.
Invite experts to talk about it in your workplace, church, or school.
Donate money or volunteer. Call 926-HELP if you need help, or log on to WTHR to see how you can join us in Shattering the Silence.
Domestic abuse is not just someone else's problem, it's a community problem.
We've shown you some ways Central Indiana is responding to domestic violence through victims' advocates and the courts. But for 5 years now, community leaders have been meeting with domestic abuse service agencies to create a family violence community plan. Right now, we look at their accomplishments and the hard work that remains.
Yeah, that's the whole problem.
On the front line of domestic abuse, a lifeline.
Let me give you the number for the other one. This is the Brightwood office.
This navigation hub connects distraught callers with people who can help.
It's a one-call stop. You don't get put on hold, and you can be transferred immediately to one of many domestic violence service-providing organizations in the city who can give you exactly what you need.
Until that first roundtable.
Community leaders gathered here in Indianapolis to hear the Navigation Hub was one of the big success stories of the domestic abuse campaign. It's as simple as dialing 926-HELP or 211.
The information I get, I want you to know it's confidential.
Over 3,300 people called the helpline since the hub opened in 2003. Domestic abuse calls went up 89% during that time. These workers made a difference.
And they would be able to give you some written referrals to area pantries.
95% of the people who called for help reported improvement in their situation.
And if you're a person who is choosing to leave an abusive situation, or you simply want to talk to someone, it's difficult to know where you fit into that system or who exactly to call.
Another success story is the coordination of the emergency bed space for victims. In the past, when shelters were full, there wasn't a backup plan. Some victims had to stay in their abusive environment, but not anymore. Now, advocates communicate with the shelters on a daily basis in order to get an accurate census. If they need to activate an overflow area, they do it here at the Social Service Center.
Folks will go there for a very short time, and then when a shelter bed becomes available in another facility, they're taken to that shelter.
But this group of community leaders know more work is left to do. Victims say they need additional help with custody issues, protective orders, and transportation.
Transportation for families to maybe get to jobs, get to schooling, get to another city where family lives.
The mayor says education programs remain a top priority, letting people know domestic abuse exists, but offering hope.
And if they turn you down, then there's also a program called Operation School Bell.
The group decided on 5 top issues that remain. Hispanic outreach is a big concern, getting information about domestic abuse to our growing Hispanic community. Economic justice, that would include child care, wages, and transportation. Advocates want to concentrate on the criminal justice system, which includes legal issues, law enforcement, and training. And they also want to do a better job coordinating services. And the last big issue is prevention.
And here's another way Central Indiana is combating domestic abuse. The Indianapolis Police Department has created a special police branch dedicated solely to serving domestic abuse victims. It's housed in a unique place, Indiana's largest domestic abuse shelter. It's a partnership that is becoming a national model.
And that's why I want to encourage you to do something before you end up dead.
Sometimes lives are on the line.
Okay, that's why we have to do this report. That's why I have to investigate this. And
on the other side of these phone lines.
It's his fault. He put his hands on you and he caused you an injury.
Detectives talking to victims of domestic abuse.
We have to have compassion.
We will help you.
We have to have understanding.
I'm trying to get to the meat of what happened.
Yet we have to be officers, and we have to, prosecute our cases.
There's going to be no contact order attached to any criminal charges.
This is the Indianapolis Police Department's domestic violence branch, housed downtown in the same building as the Julian Center, a shelter for abuse victims.
Our only job in this office is to investigate domestic violence incidents.
10 detectives and their commanders crack cases that used to slip through the cracks.
Him and him are sorting this out.
The harassments, the stalkings, the minor injuries.
We try to stress early intervention so that the crime does not escalate into a serious battery or death.
Step up in there.
And in some cases, when other Indianapolis officers arrest domestic abuse suspects or arrive on scenes where the suspect has vanished.
This is the one with the blood trail around the house, right?
Yes, that's it.
The Domestic Violence Police branch follows up on their reports quickly.
We don't have to wait for the victim to come to us. We seek her out within hours of us getting a report.
With Linda Major, a deputy prosecutor on site to help them make their cases strong.
Determining what are the appropriate charges to file.
Detectives get pictures, witness testimony, whatever it takes.
Do you think it's possible to go ahead and get this guy picked up on the warrant today?
Yeah, certainly I'll go.
Because we never know which one of these cases can end up as a homicide. We do everything that we can, irrespective of whether or not the victim is cooperating with us, to get the offender off the street.
And stronger state laws lessen the burden for the victims. They don't have to file charges against their abuser. The state can.
We hope to be that voice for the victim because it's not the victim that's bringing the case. It's the state of Indiana against that defendant.
My goal as a police officer is to put the people who are responsible for domestic battery or domestic assault in jail and to help empower the victim to know that it's not her fault.
There is no doubt that each one of these detectives, the primary goal that they have when they walk through this door is to protect victims. Every single one of them. And it is just so wonderful to come into a work environment like that every day where we are just all on the same page and we're just moving.
Somehow they can see that somebody cares and may make a difference and they live or die.
The detectives even go to court with some victims and guide them through the process. And officers direct abusers to anger management, domestic violence, or substance abuse treatment programs. The Marion County Sheriff's Department also has a domestic violence unit.
Just ahead, an inspirational story, a woman who has a surprising new vision of life after seeking help from years of abuse. But first, help us shatter the silence. Support the Navigation Hub, the Domestic Abuse Hotline. Call the Domestic Violence Network of Greater Indianapolis right now at 317-475-6110 and make a donation. You can also log on to our website at WTHR.com for their number. We're shattering the silence. Take a stand against domestic abuse.
Log on to WTHR to see how you can help.
Threatening me is abuse.
Isolating me is abuse.
Continually criticizing me is abuse.
Expecting me to obey is abuse.
Domestic abuse is not just someone else's problem, it's a community problem, and it takes a community taking a stand to stop it. Log on to WTHR.com to find out how you can join us in shattering the silence. Central Indiana has more than 60 domestic abuse service agencies, shelters, and much more, giving victims help, hope, and healing. One Indianapolis woman found help and a surprising new career after her abusive marriages stole something precious.
Neither of them wished openly to acknowledge the vulnerability they both knew to be fact.
She listens intently.
She turned her head.
As a tape recorder plays words from the printed page.
I'll accept that much reassurance.
She listens.
His green gaze steadied.
Because she cannot see.
I was diagnosed with macular hole.
Her vision partially shattered by domestic abuse.
A macular hole was the result of being beat by 2 ex-husbands. My iris was detached.
And over time, Denise Trimble went totally blind in her left eye.
I was very, very emotionally upset for at least a year.
She was angry. She was pretty distraught.
But Denise was able to see a brighter future with the help of Family Service, an Indianapolis organization that helps families in transition or crisis.
Family Services was tremendous to me.
Deanna Austin, a rehabilitation teacher for the blind at Family Service, helped Denise gain new vision.
She held my hand. She let me know that there were other ways of doing things.
We do more hands-on things, show them little adaptive things that make life much easier for them.
And Family Service gave Denise direction and the confidence to start her own home business.
A little piece of artwork here that we're going to use.
Denise chose the intricate art of glass etching.
It's a really neat art because you don't have to be an artist to do it.
But she does need a steady hand to place patterns on glass.
This equipment is very, very important.
And adaptive equipment, such as this high-powered magnifying lens, to make up for her loss of sight.
When you only have one eye, you really, really have a depth perception problem.
And the depth of her abuse, now several years behind her, is still etched in her memory.
And when you are being surrounded and clouded by verbal abuse and physical abuse and emotional abuse, you get on a pair of glasses that you simply cannot see out of. I was sent to the hospital once and I had 8 stitches over my eye, 10 stitches inside my lip, and 8 stitches on the outside here.
But just like this machine, sandblasting her glass etchings, Denise has seen life's rough edges smoothed.
I am so fortunate that I have been able to cross out of that jungle of domestic violence and cross over into a beautiful promised land of a future.
Denise says her 4 boys, her family, and her friends helped her get the courage to leave her last abusive husband.
It gets very emotional for me because I couldn't have done this without him. I couldn't.
And she urges all of us to have compassion for abuse victims, often controlled, isolated, and lost.
Don't ask them why don't they leave. Offer them help in leaving. People can overcome obstacles, no matter how great.
Denise's life now imitates her art. New, transformed, more clear.
Life is great for me now. Life is great for me.
Denise says she grew up in a home with domestic abuse, that her alcoholic father often beat her mother, so she never knew what a healthy relationship was. Every year during this campaign, we ask you to join us in shattering the silence.
How can you do that? Hear from experts who are on the domestic abuse battlefield every day. The experts say the community can hold abusers accountable. Stop blaming the victims.
most communities still ask questions like, why do you stay? Why don't you leave? Do you like this? And what we need to do is look at the person doing this and say, why do you do this?
If we don't tell that abuser that it's not acceptable, and the victim that she doesn't have to be treated that way, then we're part of the problem.
Those children are being endangered. Therefore, we will hold you accountable for your abusive behavior because your children are in danger.
We can shatter the silence, talk about it, and support the victims.
Be the person who they can go to. Be the person who they can say, this is what's going on, even if they're not prepared to leave.
We have to let women or other victims know that they're not alone.
We can educate ourselves to better understand what victims face.
I think understanding is what they need more than anything. Maybe more women would reach out if they didn't think that they would be turned away or judged or looked down on for being in the situation that they're in.
We can model respectful behavior in and out of our homes.
We all need to think about how we treat each other and what we say to each other and how we need to respect each other.
We can take a stand.
And we can stop turning our head when we see somebody being abused. Men can look at their friend and say, look, it's not cool when you talk to a woman like that. If you hear somebody being abused upstairs, make that phone call. Don't say it's just, it's a family problem.
And unless we intervene as a society and get to a critical mass of awareness about how pervasive and how evil this conduct is, we're not going to change people's minds about it.
And we can volunteer.
Have a product drive for shelters. Collect money for a particular organization. Volunteer. Go to one of the transitional housing shelters advocacy programs. Get involved. Volunteer.
You can contact the Domestic Violence Network of Greater Indianapolis to get more volunteer ideas, educational resources, and to invite domestic abuse speakers into your workplaces, schools, organizations, and churches.
Call 317-475-6110 or log on to WTHR.com for contact information. You'll also see a complete list of 21 things you can do to combat domestic abuse.
Thank you for helping us shatter the silence for the last 3 years. Many of you have already responded, volunteering and calling domestic abuse hotlines. Calls have risen dramatically during our campaign. We are saving and changing lives.
Remember, domestic abuse is a community problem. Unhealthy homes lead to unhealthy communities. Together, we can take a stand for the sake of our families, for the sake of our children. We are shattering the silence.